Ladies and gentlemen, this is probably one of the most important videos that you can watch and share. And if you have a house or a housing loan or you're paying a mortgage, then this is going to be absolutely essential information, and you are going to act fast or you are going to lose your house. Now, just to explain a few things, we have some of the best minds in Australia here today who are going to explain to you exactly what this huge deception and fraud is all about. And they are here to protect your livelihood and protect your interest. We have Zev Freeman, we have Daniel Luke, Derick Valogh, Philip Myers, Alex Zteven, and Zteven from Queensland, who are going to contribute vital information that we suggest you take notes and you share this video as quick as possible. Now, just to give you a heads up here, most of you, and you may have seen me do Mary Jane of the Family Smith here, most of you think that you have bought a house and you're paying off a mortgage and that you're going to own the house and the land. Well, guess what? The banks have shafted you because they've done a deal with a fictitious entity called Mary Jane Smith, which is not you, and they have created a whole level of deceptions to rip you off blind. So now we're going to go to some people who are going to give you some more details on that. Perhaps, Zev, if I can go to you first of all, you can explain what this initial fraud is about.
Well, look, to start with, for most people, they believe that their mortgage or their home loan is actually to pay off a home or a house or land or property. In actual fact, at the end of the day, if you guys all have a look at your titles and your deeds, you'll see you've been assigned a loss number, an LOT number, for what it is you believe you actually own. Now, LOT, L-O-T, actually stands for location of title. Now, that means you don't own a home, you don't own property, and you don't actually own a house, to which the banks have deceived you into thinking you're paying off. What you're actually paying for is a location of title. What you are paying off a vast amount of money for is coordinates on a map. That is, according to the banks, technically what you are paying for. You are paying rent on coordinates on a map. And this is the first step that they deceive you guys into by not providing full disclosure on the contract, otherwise known as a mortgage, which Derick will fill us in a little bit more in a minute, to the point where you're technically paying for coordinates on a map, which you don't own, and you are paying rent to the banks on those coordinates on a map. And these mortgages, these debts that everyone's incurred and a slave to, these debts are prepaid and insured. The bank's already made their money on them. They're selling them, they're trading on them. They've been paid 2, maybe 3 times already for the money they're claiming that you owe them to pay rent for coordinates on a map. I suggest everybody do some research into that and look into that. Derick will fill us in a little bit more, as will some of our others today. But that's a first little intro into some of the beginnings of the deception that people are not informed of, not aware of, and again, no full disclosure on the contract, guys, making the contracts null and void.
Well, Zev, that's pretty amazing stuff. And dare we say it, that's criminal behaviour. If any of us tried to do that, we'd be thrown in jail for years and years and years. Derick, if I can throw to you, because what is a so-called mortgage?
Well, very basically, in very short terms, because there's no such thing as a mortgage contract because they're all fraud. I am arguing, and I'm taking a matter forward with ANZ people, because I've got an actually copy of a bank mortgage sent to us from Shane Elliott's office, which does not contain the signatures of anyone from the bank. Hold on, isn't a contract meant to be an agreement between two parties equally agreeing to terms of an agreement, a contract? The banks do not sign the mortgage because they know they're going to sell it. I've got the papers in with Victoria Police. I've got that document in with the State Attorney General, Jill Hennessy, who's protecting the ANZ Bank, which is based in Melbourne. only 10 minutes away in Docklands from her office. And they are concealing the greatest fraud on the Australian public, which is there's no such thing as a mortgage. Because that mortgage is transferred with all these bundles of mortgages into a tranche called a trust, and that trust is sold to an undisclosed third party, and most of the time, in fact 99% of the time, that third party is called Perpetual Trustee Corporation.
Well, this is pretty deep stuff. We're talking about endemic, long-term criminal fraudulent behaviour by the banks, by the governments, against the people of Australia. Is that correct?
That's correct. And
Philip,
this is,
have you got something that you'd like to contribute? Because I know that this is a very passionate area for you. Is there something you would like to contribute?
I knew, I was fairly certain there was a fraud going on, but I thought it was only in the level of, because in a loan agreement under common law, you're supposed to have certainty of terms. So selling mortgages with variable interest rates doesn't give you certainty of terms. I thought that was the extent of the fraud, but it sounds to me like it goes far deeper, Derick, than just that basic level of fraud. Is that right? Or?
Well, if we can also bring in the concept of ownership of something, is the person, or sorry, the living being that creates something has ownership. So if we go technically, then all land was created by the Supreme Creator. So no one can own land. At best, they can have a claim of ownership on land. And it puts a very interesting situation where banks think that they own land and that they're selling off something that they don't really own. So that the fraud can go deeper and deeper. I know, Daniel, Luke, you've had lots of questions come to you. Is there something specifically that you could bring to the table at this point?
At this point, the questions are off-site at the moment, but I'll bring them later. But, you know, when you do go to a bank, you know, how do you open up an account? You use that birth certificate. And I'm not sure if it's every state, but it's known that you cannot use that that's instrument for proof of identity. Now, I presume rather, that when that you begin a bank account, by using that birth certificate, it gives power of attorney to the actual bank. So they get access to something of a trust that's created through that birth certificate at birthing. And also, I've heard that if you've got $50,000, you want to go for a home loan, you say, I've got the deposit, you know, the manager goes ahead with it. You autograph or sign that agreement, the mortgage, the death pledge is the you're actually creating that credit, and they access the treasury, cancel it as it comes to them, and then they also loan it out X amount of times, and that's just crazy. And then
wow, this is getting deeper and deeper and deeper into their criminal activities. I know, for example, I went to my bank manager and said, I wish my account changed over to my common law name, my proper name, and the bank manager refused to do it. So they're very, very complicit in this fraud. Alex, Stefan, is there something, welcome aboard, is there something you'd like to contribute at this point?
Yeah, I'd like to go back to Derick. I'm really interested in knowing about the court cases that he's running. And I understand that fraud has actually been uncovered in these court cases, and certain mortgages have been either cancelled or discharged. Can you maybe tell us more about that?
well, let me just go straight to a court case in Western Australia, which is happening right now. I have a farmer who has been in court for nearly 10 years. And the bank, Bendigo Bank, I'm going to call them out because I'm actually holding the Chief Executive Officer, Marnie Baker, accountable if she can't produce the trust. it's $25 million US on her table, and I'm looking for another 39 people with Bendigo Bank mortgages, and I use the word mortgages to communicate with people, which she can't produce, to put down a $1 billion class action against her, because the lawyer said it's an abuse of the court process to request the mortgage. It's an abuse of the mortgage, the subpoena process, to request in a courtroom the bank produce the mortgage. We have now moved past the mortgage and the trust, and we've said we know why you want to set aside the subpoena for the mortgage and the trust. We want the bond traded at Austraclear, a division of the Australian Stock Exchange. I've got the name of the chairman, Peter Ralph Marriott. This is what we are executing right now, and this farmer is arguing this affidavit because everything we do is by an affidavit. That's our only defence, is the statement of truth in our words and certified and witnessed by a JP or a court registrar. This is the palpable extent of the corruption that the barristers are going to accuse this man. It is an abuse to request a copy of these papers by subpoena, which we have said we understand because you are now up for perjury.
So, Derick, just to understand this more clearly, so are you saying that they don't want to, they're saying that it's an abusive process because they don't actually have the documentation anymore?
Well, we told them, because I have the reference of a publication from a professor of law, that it is immoral, it is unconscionable to transfer a person's mortgage into a trust without written knowledge.
Okay, so our understanding is that this happens all the time through a process known as securitization. Is that correct?
Well, that's how they do business. That's why Australia's banks are the most profitable in the world, because they don't lend any money.
And you're saying that this is actually illegal?
Well, it's not illegal. I call it money laundering. I call it criminal. Illegal is beyond illegal. It's criminal. It's criminal. Right. That's why.
Wow. Wow. I just wanted to bring in, because I think there are, all of us here know of people who have had their properties taken away from them by the banks, who foreclosed on mortgages all the way through and have been left destitute by the activities of banks. But we know, Derick, that that's going to escalate because of this so-called COVID virus and the effects that have had. Would you like to elaborate a little bit more on what is happening because of this so-called COVID virus decrees?
Well, if I can speak honestly and freely, I call it the greatest scam perpetrated on the whole world, which is not from Australia, it's coming from the United States. Started in China. We've got documents that the CSIRO lab in Geelong actually was participating to weaponize the SARS virus. But I'm not here for that question. I'm here to say this is the cover for the banks to go full steam ahead while the courts are closed and go ahead and get judgments from their friends, the administrators. I call them, well, everyone calls them judges and justices. I call them administrators because they all have an ABN number. Every Supreme Court has a GST number. They're registered to pay tax. If they're taxable, they are a corporation. And we've got the paperwork in our document called The Death of the Andrews Government, which we are sending to every politician, state and federal, every day, that we have conclusive documentation. The county court, which is beneath the Supreme Court in Victoria, which I can guarantee, I put this in my court cases, is owned by HSBC, Citibank, JP Morgan, and BNP. How can you have justice when the administrator is working for HSBC Bank? This is the question I'm getting out in my next document to follow up from the Death of the Andrews Government. I have not got the conclusive proof, but I have got a friend who is withholding this document for his own reasons, that the Supreme Court of Victoria has been sold to Goldman Sachs. Sold, not leased, not rented, sold. But because he's got his own agenda, which is the point that is holding us back, I have not got that document to put that into any documentation. I do not do an affidavit without the conclusive proof that politicians of our country, from one end to the other, have systematically sold our legal system to the highest bidder.
Wow, this is big stuff. And for those of you who are taking this on board, this is big. And we want to make sure that we focus on you and your house and your rights and your security. So we're just giving you the details and how deep this thing is before we come back to how we can assist you, the normal person, a normal living man or woman in the street who is in good faith, purchased what they thought was a house. Now, would somebody like to speak to the fact that the banks put themselves forward as lenders, meaning that they've got a loophole in the very fact that the borrowers come to them. So there was never an offer put in place, and they use that distinction to claim on the security. Would somebody like to expand on that and perhaps take it a little bit deeper? Zev, I know you had something to say there as well.
Oh, look, I was slightly different to your query there. I just wanted to point out to people what Derick's saying, that our courts and judiciary system have literally been sold off, and this has been occurring for many years, as to why our judicial system has become so corrupt and so fraudulent and full of fiction and lies. Now, the other thing to point out to people, if we are the living men and women of this country, as the living, we can't contract with the dead. Now, a corporation is not a living entity. It is a non-living entity, otherwise known as a dead entity or a corporation. There is no meeting of the minds, therefore no joinder, therefore no contract can be attained between the living and the dead. We are operating in completely different realms and arenas. The living have jurisdiction over the dead, not the other way around. And when you go into our judicial system, you are tricked and deceived into believing that you are in fact a corporation, pursuant to the Crimes Act, where the term person is actually listed in the definitions, so excuse me, as a corporation. Because if you were listed as a living man or woman, they would have no authority or jurisdiction over you, and they are unable to contract with you, as the dead cannot contract with the living. And this is one of the fundamental differences between living men and women and persons and corporations, as to where we all get tricked and deceived. And this is one of the first places where we all get stitched up, because we're told that we have to enter into these agreements, these contracts, yet the dead cannot contract with the living.
Awesome. So if I can clarify that for people, this is you, the living man or woman. This is the dead entity on paper that they are operating under. And they're deceiving you into thinking you are a name on a piece of paper.
So that doll, that would be the living, that would be the flesh and blood, brother and sister, like auntie and uncle and everything else. And that piece of paper, that they're that would be the person. So as I mentioned earlier, that access that the banks get through the presumed power of attorney to access that trust, would that also what would be happening there in the court system, Zev, with that person, aka dead fiction?
Absolutely. This is the straw man many of you hear about. This is why when you walk into court, the first question they ask you is, are you John Smith? They need you to be the trustee of that corporation in order to do business with you. And at the magistrate's level of court, that is purely set up for commerce. There's very simple. Legal matters are for the dead, lawful matters are for the living. And when you're in the magistrate's court, for example, these are legal matters for the sole purpose of commerce. Now, again, they can't do commerce with you as agents or representatives of a non-living entity or a corporation, as Derick's pointed out, which has been sold to the likes of JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, etc. These aren't non-living entities. These are corporations that own that. Therefore, the employees, such as magistrates and prosecutors, etc., these are employees or agents, representatives of a non-living entity, of a corporation. And again, the dead cannot do business with the living. There is no meeting of the minds there. There is no joinder. And if there's no meeting of the minds, no joinder, there can be no contract.
Is that why that they have a solicitor to solicit and represent? So they represent that man to the dead, and they be summons to court and stuff like that. Yeah. And
yeah, well, Absolutely, mate. The summons is an invitation, not a summons. It's an invitation to appear. And let's look at the words to solicit, to make anxious. This is a solicitor's job. And they get paid a fortune to make people anxious. So we need more people like Derick fighting for the people, see the right thing done to expose this fraud, expose the fiction, and show people how to get around it in a lawful manner rather than in a legal manner.
Great. We're going to get to solutions for people, because I'm sure by now there are a lot of people watching this who are going, oh, hell, what am I going to do? But there's a more pressing issue to this, Derick, is it? Because there's a time. We're time sensitive at the moment. Can you explain as to why we have to act now? Your microphones.
Thank you. There's an expression that the banks have created called the September cliff. And not enough people that I speak to from different places and states are aware of what this actually means. It goes like this. ANZ started about 3 weeks ago by giving one of their executives the time to go on the media and saying, if people cannot afford to repay their mortgages, they should consider selling up. Great message if you live in Victoria, where we're under lockdown and the economy is being crushed because of this man who has imposed laws beyond his power, beyond his reach, but he has brought so many hundreds of thousands of small businesses to their knees to find a buyer for your property. Then last week, it would have been in the last 7 days, Matt Common, the chief executive of the Commonwealth Bank, reissued the same message that we believe it's now time for people to start repayments. If they cannot do so, we will be forced to start reclaiming properties by repossession and foreclosure. So this is 2 of the largest banks in the country who have reiterated the message, the point that they're trying to get out through the media. Well, we'll terrify you with the COVID-19 crisis on one side, but we'll just give you a very small message that we will start legal action for those people who haven't been paying for the last 6 months. But Derick, they also said that the banks are going to be very generous to extend the September cliff till March next year. And I said, I have no proof of that. I haven't seen a document, but I have got people from every state in Australia sending me an email. Derick, I saw you on this Zoom, or I saw you on that podcast, or I saw an email from a friend. How do I get this bank mortgage letter? And what do I do? And this Zoom session and the people who organize this meeting is about sharing this letter, because I do not listen to the garbage of the media, which is contrived, it's manufactured, it's about scaring the hell out of us in order for us to be distracted from what is happening in real life. Is the suicide rate is never reported. No one is dying of cancer. No one is dying from a car accident. No one is dying of any other illness because the doctors are getting paid to write COVID-19 on a 90-year-old man's death certificate locked in a nursing home. This is the problem. And I'm trying to get the message. It's about getting your protection in place with your mortgage and making a request for a mortgage document which does not exist because it's been sold.
So we're in a situation where all of the organisations and people that we've been led to believe to trust, the medical profession, the media, the governments, the banks, are in fact all in bed with one another for the purpose of exploiting the living man and women. Okay, and we have very clear indication that this upcoming deadline in September, the banks are intending to pressure you that if you can't pay your mortgage, you're going to lose your property. So this is not an outcome. This has been a strategy all along, that they are going to do this to take your property back from you. So this is a very important thing for everyone to realize. We have a couple of weeks to act on this. If you have a mortgage, you must take what Derick and the other intelligent, educated folk on this panel are saying seriously, or you are going to lose the lot. That is their intention. They don't care about you. They're all about money and exploiting you. We care about you. That's why we've got this extraordinary panel together to help you protect your assets. So let's start looking about what we can do now. We know, first of all, that people can register as a living man or woman on a common law court, and that will give them an option to claim ownership of the fictitious name, claim ownership of this away from the fraudulent creation, and then you can transfer the ownership of this property to your living being. You can even sell it for $1, and that is a lawful process, which leaves the bank having to try to get the funds out of the fictitious entity. But there's more to it than that. And so, Derick, I really want to hand over to you now before we start asking some general questions. What's the solution?
Well, thank you, Alex. If people can get in touch with your group, because your group have got a copy of this document, and we didn't actually discuss how we're going to have an email address. I'm happy for you to actually say to people, you can just write to me directly. I've got to get this bank mortgage request letter out ASAP. We are less than 1 week away from the beginning of September, and then slowly, and then with a downpour, the numbers of people are going to be receiving these types of letters because, as an example, Bendigo and Adelaide Bank, which has a lot of mortgages for farmers across the country, they saw their profit retreat 50% in 6 months. That to me is going to be a warning, and I've said this to the farmers I'm speaking to in Queensland and Western Australia. They're going to have to find money to recover their profit decrease, which is the worst of all the big banks. That's what I look for. That's what I listen for. If they're going to be suffering a decrease in their profits, and we had another session with this group yesterday of the fake law called the bail-in law. It is in place unlawfully, only passed by 7 senators in the middle of the night, and the minimum number was 20 people to have a quorum in the Senate. We have a bail-in law that if a bank says we are suffering a profit crunch, the government is now obliged to say you are able to take people's money from their bank account, as they did in Cyprus over 10 years ago when the banks put up their walls, they locked their doors, and no one could get $1 from the teller machines. We've got the same law in Australia, unlawfully, illegally, without our knowledge.
And we have evidence of people who have already had large amounts of money taken out of their superannuation, out of their bank accounts by the banks, and they have no recourse, because when they ask the banks why, the banks say, we don't have to tell you. It's already happening, folks. And we are here to help you protect yourself from this unlawful and criminal action of these corporations. So we're going to arrange for that document, Derick, to perhaps be directly downloadable from a number of websites so that people can get access to this straight away. And we will also give some connections from people who can assist them if they need to understand what is going on. So we're not just going to dump it on the table and say to people, okay, you sort it out. We're going to be here as a resource to assist you. Now, Daniel, Luke, I know you've already had some questions from people, and perhaps Alex, you have some more questions as well, and Phil, you have some questions that would come from people who are concerned about this issue, and they're concerned that literally the banks are going to steal their property back from them because they're not in a position to be able to meet these payments, these unlawful contracted payments.
Yes, I might just jump in there. So, Derick, just so we can all be clear, so the purpose of this letter, if I'm not mistaken, is to highlight the fact that we have fraud in the banking system. We're telling the bank that we believe they're committing fraud. We're basically calling them out on it. And this then becomes a document that we could legitimately hold up in court as proof of what's going on, because I'm guessing that then the banks are not just going to get this letter and then fall over themselves to cancel the loan. what happens? So you get this letter, you fill it out. I'm supposing you send it to the bank. What happens then?
Okay, I'm very glad that you actually asked that question because I need to get this message out. My experience with people that have sent this to the Commonwealth Bank have passed this on to their credit card department. Hold on. The bank letter says under Australian consumer law called the Competition Consumer Act that under section 51 capital ACA, it said that an industry must have a code of conduct. Banking is a regulated industry. They have a code of conduct called the Banking Code of Practice. And I implore, I beg, no, I'm going to say it. I beg people to go to a bank branch and ask for the A4 copy of the Banking Code of Practice, which they are entitled to get a copy for free from their bank. And look for chapter 37, which says if you request, you are obliged to receive a copy of your mortgage and your security documents. Now, what's the next step? I've got a process of letters that follow this first letter. Everyone says to me, Derick, what happens if they don't reply? Which they're not doing. They're not doing this at all because they can't provide the document. The second letter, which I'm now putting down a date of 14 days, is a notice of acquiescence to the CEO. Thank you for your non-compliance with my request under Australian consumer law and the Australian Banking Association, which the chairman of the ABA is Matt Common of Commonwealth Bank, that you cannot comply with your own code of conduct, which is $1 million per breach. But I need a number of people to make that argument and take that further. The notice of acquiescence is thank you that you have now expunged and deleted my debt because you have now confirmed there is no mortgage, no memorandum, and there's no residential mortgage-backed securities trust. And then the process proceeds with an affidavit process. And they have a strict 7-day turnaround to respond because this is the document I use in every Supreme Court, that if an affidavit is unrebutted, it stands above the judge. This is our power, which is still in our system. This was confirmed to me 2 days ago by a Queen's Counsel, the highest level of a lawyer before they become a judge, that if an unrebutted affidavit is not answered, it is a judgment on its own. It's a judgment of law. And we tell the banks, we now have a judgment because you have acquiesced. There is a process.
This is a very, very powerful process, Derick. And we can't stress enough on those of you watching this. If you have a housing loan, a mortgage, you must do this to protect your future for your family, for your kids, your assets. All your hard work that you have put in has been paid to the banks, and they've already taken this money out of your trust account. They're double dipping. This is where the fraud just gets deeper and deeper and deeper. We are here, these amazing people here and others back behind the scenes, to fight for your rights. But if you don't take action and then you come to us 6 months later and say, oh, can you help us? You're asking us to help you dig it out of a much deeper hole. It's really important that you act on this now within the next few weeks before the banks pull this stunt on you and before the governments pull these stunts on you. Really important. Daniel Luke, can I hand it to you now? Because I know you've got some stuff to say.
Yes, sure. Now, a few questions I have here from some people, Derick. Do we get the deeds to the mortgage after we expose it for being fraudulent? If it is written off, or are they going to just hand over the title deed then?
I actually had a question very similar from another session I had about a week ago where people were trying to disprove the Constitution, and that's another story for another day. And then one woman asked a question. She said, I've actually paid off my mortgage 3 months ago and I'm still waiting for my title deed. And I said, I don't think you're ever going to see it again. And she said, but I paid off my mortgage. And I said, yes, because it's being traded on the stock market. just like we have annual car registration rates on our vehicles, which are meant to be for fixing up our roads, they are a tradable, securitized, negotiable instrument. Just like a personal loan, just like a credit card, they're all bundled up into bundles of trusts, and they are traded. They have got a process, and I'm going to call out Kim Beazley, former leader of the Labor Party, former ambassador for Australia to the United States and current governor of Western Australia. I've got a screenshot of him saying 20 years ago, the United Nations has given Australia permission to repossess every farm, every business, every home, and nationalise them under the government. This is his quote 20 years ago. This is what I'm trying to say to people. If we have our protections in place with the starting, with requesting our mortgage under the law we have today, we have got a process to recover that property. And together with all the people on this session, everyone's got a different piece of information. I've got to where I am by speaking to enough people who've gone to court, who've lost and won, and who've lost, and they've gone through to get discovery of their papers from AFCA. Oh, hold on. The chairman of AFCA is an employee of JP Morgan. The Australian Financial Complaints Authority has a bank employee sitting at the top of the tree. This is what I'm trying to expose to people. This woman, Helen Coonan, was a former minister under John Howard. Now she's got a plum job, doing nothing, to take financial complaints and say after 3 months, well, Derick, we've had a look at your file and there's nothing more we can do with you, so we'll let the bank take you to court now. But you didn't expose where's the mortgage. Well, we can't go that far. I only use AFCA for the point of extracting as many documents as possible, including the fact that the lender of record, I've got this document from Western Australia, the lender of record is not your bank. It's Perpetual Trustee Company, owned by HSBC, Citibank, JP Morgan and BNP.
Maybe, Derick, just quickly, maybe you'd like to touch on the Kingfisher Trust that a lot of this is tied into for everyone, just to enlighten them a little bit on that.
Well, the Kingfisher Trust is a dirty word for Mr. Shane Elliott, who's the chief executive of ANZ. I could not get to Brisbane last December for his annual general meeting. And one of the friends of mine that went to that meeting actually said, Derick, what do I ask the chief executive? And I said, you would like to have a copy of your mortgage, which has been transferred into the Kingfisher Trust. And he violently reacted in front of the whole meeting, said, we are not obliged to give you anything to do with your mortgage. Because he hasn't got it, he sold it. It's gone. And I've got that confirmed by the professor of law who has published her thesis. I've got her thesis, I've got her book, and she said it's immoral. It's unconscionable to transfer a mortgage into a trust without written confirmation to the borrower. The borrower is us, because there is no borrowings, because earlier one of the members of the group has said our signature is the credit. We're not borrowing $1 from the bank. That's why we're not paying a mortgage. Mortgage meaning from the French, until you die, literally. We are giving them a document which they do not sign, which means it's not a contract because there's only one signature, your signature on that paperwork. They can't give it to you. And when I go to court, the first question I say to the court, I need a copy of the mortgage and I need to see page 1. Why do you need to see page 1? I want to see the money transfer stamp and the code which bank you sold it to. And the lawyers go white. They go pale. How did you know about the money transfer stamp? Oh, it's on Facebook. What do you mean it's on Facebook? They hate that question. There's a money transfer stamp on page 1 and they can't release that publicly because it'll break the bank. It's the proof. That's why they can't give you the mortgage. I've tested this with every bank. That's why I'm in a hurry with the great people on this Zoom session to get out this bank mortgage letter ASAP.
Just quick
So,
one.
folks, you understand how important this is for you. You have to act now. If you don't, you stand to lose everything. So filling out a piece of paper and getting it happen is an insurance policy for you, for all the hard work that you've done over years and years and years to set up a future for yourself and for your family. Daniel, Luke, do you have any other questions there?
Yes, certainly do, Alex. Derek, my friend just paid their mortgage and didn't receive a deed. All she could get was a receipt for the last payment. Is the property safe?
Sorry, is the property
Safe.
safe? No, it's not. This is the question that I am seeing now more often, is there are people who have got money elsewhere and they're selling up assets, or they're selling a second property which they had for their kids, for their futures, and trying to do something to look forward, and they're selling these properties in a distressed market, and they're coming back and saying the bank won't give me back my title. Now, for those people who live in Queensland, and I haven't done the research because I don't have an army of researchers yet, and I do hope that might change soon, when the land titles office in Queensland was sold, they converted your lot number, your volume and folio number, which is your protection under estate in fee simple rights, which means you can do anything you want to your land. You can burn it to the ground, to the bare rock, so long as you do not spoil your neighbour's enjoyment of their land. You can do what you like. That does not include paying a permit to cut a branch. It doesn't include a permit to put a veranda on the back of your back door. It doesn't include another corporation to ask you for money, a tax, for you to put a second story on your house. What I'm trying to say is they have converted our volume and folio number to a receipt number because they are summarily destroying our property rights right now. Why? Because they have a program is to disenfranchise us from our properties the moment we get taken into a court and get a judgment. Victoria, only just recently in the last 24 months, we sold our land titles office to make better hospitals and better schools. Our hospitals are in chaos and our school system can't keep up with the money to repair the damage of 20 years of neglect. Where's the money gone? It's been taken over by 2 superannuation funds. Oh, really? What on earth has a superannuation fund for public sector employees got to do with your home or my home? This is what they have done. They are destroying our titles to convert them to a digital system which is in place where we won't need to sign our papers anymore. That means it's open to fraud unless you put an autograph with your name printed with your thumbprint and a drop of blood. That's the only way not to have your name copied or forged, which is happening now.
It sounds like some major security fraud taking place there, and I believe if they cannot provide that deed that they sell off there, Derek, that it can be reported to the Security Exchange Commission, I believe, over in the United States, and they take investigation out. So that there's another little bit of a spanner in the works. And there is certain USC codes that are quite relevant here in Australia. And I'll link some of those that pertain to what Derek speaks of in the links below too. Now, our next question we have here, Derek, Daniel, hang on. I've paid my mortgage off, but cannot get my mortgage title. How do I do that, please?
Very simple question. Write that letter to your CEO. You want a copy of your mortgage, you want the memorandum, and you need to go and ask them for your residential mortgage trust. Now, this was a question that I wanted to bring up into the session we had yesterday. For those people who do have the ability and time, you need to write to your land titles officers in your state and ask them for a copy of all the documents pertaining to your property. One of those documents is called the Memorandum of Common Provisions. And that's what the bank must lodge on title, that they are the conditions that if you pay your mortgage, no will leave you alone. When you don't pay your mortgage, they have a right under the memorandum to take legal action against you. The second document is called the registration of your mortgage. And I have never seen, except for one person who had a commercial and a residential property, that there was a principal sum listed at land titles of any money owing to the bank. Why? Because the bank's going to sell the mortgage. I have tested this in the Supreme Courts, and the judges say that document is not important. Oh, really? The Land Titles Office documents, the record of our property, is not important in a court case. No, you don't understand, Mr. Valogh. That's not really important because the barrister said you didn't pay your mortgage last month. The wrong answer is, well, I tried, but there was a bushfire and there was a coronavirus and the economy's going backwards. The correct answer is there's no such thing as a mortgage, Your Honour. I'm paying rent and I'm entitled to see the bond. The gentleman that you just said, Daniel Luke, who said he's paid off his mortgage, has got to get the letter out ASAP.
Brilliant. Thanks, David. And you mentioned that page 1 there, the page 1 that's got that stamp. What does that pertain to? Is that in particular, so if any of the listeners want to, really push for that particular page, what is that attached to? Just the deed itself, or what is it pertain to?
Well, once the bank says, Daniel, we're going to sell your mortgage, and you say great, and you sign it, and they say, oh, we'll do the rest of it afterwards, and we'll send you the memorandum tomorrow, and we'll send you a copy of the mortgage tomorrow, which they never do. This is why people are saying to me now, I've paid off my mortgage, but I've never had a copy. They don't want you to have a copy because they're going to bundle those up into a different category of properties. There'll be those properties in the middle of a city, which they'll be easily able to sell in a trust. Then there's those properties in the outer suburbs, which might be a bit more riskier because, that's the hardworking mums and dads with their families trying to just get by with paying their mortgage. And then there's the people on the farms. They're all in different categories. And when they bundle them up and get to, on average, and sometimes it can be less and sometimes it can be more, but CommBank and Westpac, I know, aim for $1 billion worth of mortgages at a time. And they will say, we're going to sell it to Bank X or Bank Y, and they have a stamp. And I can confirm this from someone who's way above my pay grade. And they put down a code, and this gentleman has the codes of every bank in the world. And I have tried, I have put subpoenas, I have made requests for notices of discovery in the Supreme Courts, and the judges say it won't be necessary. Oh, really? It's the mortgage contract. No barrister I have ever come across in my 5 years of doing this has ever been able to bring the mortgage into the court because it doesn't exist.
Major security fraud.
Yes.
Wow. We're really getting down into the tunnel now, into the white rabbit, down the hole, down the furrow. It is deep, and it's pretty stinky down there. That's for sure. Philip, I know you've got some stuff that you'd like to say. Do you have a question or a comment at this point?
Yeah, I've got a question from someone at the meeting last night. They're asking about if a property's been refinanced through a broker, or whether they've got the original property through a broker. How's that affected in this process, Derick?
I actually have a few people who've gone to companies, and I'm going to mention them because I have letters going out to the CEOs like Latrobe Financial. They're not a bank. They're a money manager. They're a mortgage manager. Resimac in Queensland and Aussie Home Loans. I don't know if anybody knows this, but they're just another brand for the Commonwealth Bank. They're not a broker. So that's a furphy that people are still under the impression that they will shop your mortgage around and get you the best rates and they'll get you the best lead deal, but it goes to the Commonwealth Bank first, and if they don't like it, then they'll say out.
Okay.
They have the same problem. They cannot produce the mortgage because they sold it to a larger bank who is going to collect them into a tranche of mortgages and bundle them up and sell them through a trust.
Wow.
So
I've got a question here from Terry, who's joined us, and I think it's probably a good follow-on question from Phil's one. Terry, are you there to ask the question, or would you like me to ask it for you?
I'm here. Thank you, Alex.
Great.
Thank you, Daniel, Luke. Derick, I had a mortgage with a bank called Commonsure. That mortgage then went into the hands of Commonwealth Bank without notice. And I found myself with limited income, and as children were aging out. And at that point, I knew that I was going to I could see foreseeable hardship coming up. So I contacted the bank and I said, look, this is the situation. What can I do? And they put me through to the hardship team. The hardship team said, what do you want us to do? There's nothing we can do. Your loan is not in debt. It actually was in quite a significant amount of credit. And I was then sent on my way. I fell in hardship. I was unable to juggle the mortgage, and I had 2 mortgages at the time. And so I had to sacrifice one of those 2, and I walked into the Commonwealth Bank, which is the one that they actually had. And because they had no knowledge, it was just a local branch, they rang their head office, and I virtually said, I'm surrendering my house and I'm not leaving this bank until you take it over and you take the keys from my hands. They then said, look, put it on in writing, which I drafted a quick sketch of the surrender, and they took that on gospel, and off I went. They took the house. As of that day, I received a letter from a debt collector saying that I owed X amount of dollars, which was part of the process. So they virtually put me in default at that time. So they used up all the credit that was in the account, and then they went from there. And then the attendee that was from the Commonwealth Bank drafted up an agreement, and that agreement cleared out the credit card, the mortgage to that property, and attempted to include the second property. The second property was one that I purchased with compensation, and they wanted me to put my son's name on that earlier in the piece, which I did, and that saved that property. So they couldn't get that property. They could only take the one. So they got that, and as a result of that, they then turned around, cleared out the loan, cleared out the credit card, cleared out the mortgage, and lo and behold, instead of putting surrender, they put default, and I overlooked that, and it kind of caught me. So is there any compensation that can be sought from that because of the way it was all handled? They actually breached the agreement because they told creditors that there was a default there and they weren't supposed to. So they actually breached their own agreement.
Terry, I am really sorry to hear your story because I hear a very similar type of arrangement where people are trying to do the right thing, and the banks seem to have great pleasure in taking that and destroying families. And this is happening every single day. They are in default of breach of the fraud, but when they own the courts in Australia, that will not ever make it inside a courtroom. And I've tried, because they say, well, Terry, did you borrow the money? And the wrong answer is yes. I'm saying now, or what I did before the courts were closed, I never have any proof that Bank A showed me which bank account they transferred the money to the seller of the property, so I can't answer that question. I don't know if there was any money that was borrowed. But I don't expect you to understand that, because I've had to test that out and try that in the court. They have committed fraud. I call it money laundering, because
Yes.
they shifted your mortgage, they have sold it through a trust, they have accepted that you gave them a letter because you're under enormous financial pressure, and they've accepted that house and said, oh, we will sell the property and we're going to give all the money, the profits to the lawyers and the real estate agents, and pay some money to the removal company. And they always have a problem to sell the property for what it's worth, and everybody is always in default of the property, even in good times.
Well,
I can imagine your story.
we must be mindful of the time here, and what we've got is a very broad range of ways in which the banks have acted dishonorably, criminally, fraudulently, and we need to take action against that. And as Derick said, you know, it's highly unlikely you're going to get remedy in one of their courts. And that's why we're setting up the common law courts, so that people can get remedy in a just system. And we're hopeful that within the next 4 weeks, we can start that process and people can put claims in and get them heard. And as most of you are probably aware, the highest court on land is a common law court. It's a court of the people. And those verdicts are binding on all systems. Now, I'm very mindful of the time here, and we could go on talking about the criminal activities of the banks for hours. But I'm very mindful of the fact that we want to get to the solutions for you, the people. So I'm going to just quickly go around the board now and get any last thoughts on actions moving forward for the people. So perhaps, Zev, if I come to you first about your thoughts on how the people can move forward.
Well, I think key is we'll put up some links for this when we post this for everyone as to where they can get these letters from, what they have to request from the banks, thanks to Derick's help. And effectively, guys, what you're doing, you're putting the banks on notice. You're giving them a set amount of time to respond to your request. Failure to do so will result in your acceptance of their acquiescence by silence, agreeing to the terms and conditions of your request, and therefore having them comply and agreeing with your terms and conditions, as opposed to their fraudulent fictional conditions, which we've been tricked and deceived into unlawfully agreeing to. And just the last little thing people will bear in mind, a contract, as they're claiming these mortgages are, requires full disclosure. Now, from everything everyone on here has put forward today, there is clearly a massive, massive lack of any type of disclosure, let alone full disclosure, around what they're claiming to be a legally binding contract provided without full disclosure. And this
Awesome.
is part of what Derick's paperwork does, is to request that disclosure and any and all relevant information, which you are well entitled to have.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Zev, for that. Daniel Luke, do you have a final thought?
I think Zev pretty much covered it, but I do urge, ladies and gentlemen, all the people who's out there, you know, do take this very seriously. And as Zev has said, you know, it all comes down to contract, full disclosure. There will be links below to certain places of all different types that can support you. And there'll be people there that can certainly guide you and hold your hand in this current environment.
Thank you, Daniel Luke. Philip, do you have a parting thought?
I do, Alex. It's one of the things that it troubles me a lot with this. It feels like we all went to sleep sometime in December, January, over Christmas, and we've woken up into this absolutely strange and troubling world. My concern is very much that we've got people that have struggled through bushfires. We've got people that are struggling through this lockdown. And I worry about the mental health of people when they realise that it goes even deeper and deeper. The banks, I suppose most people recognise that the banks have been ripping us off for years, but to have it proven in your face what their actual fraud is, I'm very concerned that this just could push people over the edge. And my concern is for their mental health and spiritual well-being of people dealing with yet another assault on their life.
Philip, you've just raised really important views there, and I put this out to anyone who is watching this video. If you are under stress, please reach out. Don't be the big tough guy or the lady who thinks that they can deal with it. If you are struggling, reach out to our group, to any group, because we're here for the people. And it's really important that you don't feel that you are fighting this battle alone. Please reach out. Thank you for raising that, Philip. Alex, Stefan, you have something that you'd like to add to where we're finishing?
Yeah, I do. Several things. The first thing is, where do people reach out to? So we need to mention that. The second thing also is, I can imagine there's a lot of people wondering, can this process and this letter also be used for other forms of credit, such as credit cards, personal loans, car loans, etc. And then finally, I was wondering whether it might have actually been a good idea for us to actually screen share and just go through the letter quickly and just show people the general structure and what it actually says. Those are the three things that I wanted to bring up.
Well, I think we're going to make the document downloadable for people to have a look at. We could do a separate video where we can do an instructional go through that. I think that's a great idea. We'll keep that separate at this stage. But they're great feedback points already. Terri, do you have something that you'd like to add before we finish up?
Yes, I just wanted to express that we do have common law courts, as I've noted in the thing. All the common law courts that have the crest of the lion and the unicorn on them are existing common law courts. And we have a Supreme Common Law Court as well. So they will be accessible to anyone. They just have to bring their matters to those courts. We actually have a few of them out here in the Central West, so I've been taking note. So the ones with the lion and the unicorn on the arch, they are the existing standing common law courts.
Wonderful, thank you for that. I'm going to give Derick the final word. Before I do that, I want to thank Zteven for working behind the scenes today in keeping us up to date and keeping everything moving. Your work behind the scenes is greatly appreciated, Zteven, so thank you very much for that. Derick, final word to you, mate. If you could just flip your mic on. No, you flipped it off again. Hang on. Okay.
Okay, apologies about that. I've got two left hands with my keyboard. I'd like to thank everybody who's made the time and effort to be on this Zoom session to get this message out about sharing this bank mortgage document. I am actively trying to bring 40 people per bank together because I know that I can't do this on my own. I can't do it one-on-one for one person against the corrupt system of our courts because they don't want to hear the constitutional argument. I have argued it. I know how to bring the Queen's Bench at Westminster into the courts, and they still will ignore it, and they will find a way to push back and work for their banking masters. The 40 people I'm going to be putting together is for a class action, but not as you would know it. It's going to be in a different shape and form, but I'm bringing and uniting people across Australia under each umbrella, because with our numbers and with the help of this wonderful group of people and getting this message out, that's the only way, because our politicians have left us. That's all I can say for the moment now. And I really do appreciate you, Alex, for making this time and this session possible. And Daniel, Luke, and Philip, and Alex, and everybody else, I'm going to forget someone's name, but thank you to make this happen, because this is not going to happen with one person. It needs an army of us to get together and link arms to make this change. So thank you from all of my heart to make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Derick. Ladies and gentlemen, you are the army that Derick is speaking about. If you're not willing to fight for your freedom and for your property, then everything we've done here is a waste of time. because we can only be as strong as you are. If you've got a bank loan or a credit card debt or something like that, and you want to be a part of this, you have to act. There's no point sitting back thinking, oh, someone else will do it for me. You are the army. Contact us, tell us which bank you're involved in, and we can pass that on to Derick. But if you don't act, you will reap what you sow. So please join together and help make a difference. Thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you soon.